Strategic Consulting Resources, number 6.
Good afternoon, Board Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Board, and Superintendent Thurman. It is my pleasure to come before you today to present 3 agenda items. The next 2 items are associated with leadership development. Item 6 is requesting the Board to approve the Strategic Consulting Services Professional Services Agreement in execution of the Principal Supervisor Initiative at a cost not to exceed $174,000. As part of the Wallace Foundation Principal Supervisor Initiative, SCR has been identified as a partner to assist with the implementation of this initiative. Some of the deliverables associated with this work are as follows: research-based competency model that defines principal supervisor competencies. Principal supervisors in our district are recognized as the regional superintendents. A fully developed principal supervisor position description that addresses all requirements defined by the competency model and meets local requirements, and a resource guide for implementation of selection process for prospective principal supervisors that includes forms, protocols, rating scales, and scripted guidelines for implementation. Mr. Chairman, subject to any questions you or the Board may have, I recommend item 6 to be placed on tonight's consent agenda.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Mayfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Bose, a couple of questions regarding, I guess, the context for the work plan associated with these consultants. I guess I want to understand how future school leadership profiles or requirements for school leaderships would either be influenced or impacted by the decisions that we're going to make in this process. Because everything that's here deals with the principals, supervisors, and I guess I have some concerns about whether or not specific requirements for schoolhouse leaderships and the requirements for their development, professional development, would in any way impact what the outcome of this assessment would be.
Sorry about that. It would, sir, if I am understanding your question correctly. As you develop the principal supervisors, part of this initiative involves really working together and partnering with school-based leaders on how to better lead their schools and providing them with the right tools to do so.
Right.
So that will ultimately be impacting their performance and their hiring as well.
Right, and so because of that, I guess my concern would be whether or not it would be appropriate, Mr. Superintendent, to at least have a parallel, actually perhaps even a preceding effort, to define what the school leadership profile needs to be in terms of the skill sets that need to be trained and or developed, whether or not that's in place, and how that might change in a charter system, as an example, so that as we move down this path of defining what our principal leaderships look like, or should look like, the principal supervisors, rather, should look like, that it in fact reflects what will be on the ground in the schools based on what we're hoping to achieve at the school level. Does that make sense?
It does. Dr. Bose, go ahead. He's my expert.
It does, and it seems like I keep losing the microphone, so my apologies for that. Though the Principal Supervisor Initiative does not go to that depth, it could potentially lead us in that direction as well. There are 6 pipeline districts that really looked at that principal position over the past 6 years through the Wallace Foundation. And a lot of this work, as it moves us forward, is we're reviewing that work and the connection to that work to the Principal Supervisor work. So it can certainly influence how we hire, prepare, retain current leaders, building-based leaders, as well as looking at their job description and how we want that to look like for the future.
And to that point, I will add, one of the prime objectives here is to develop the pipeline for principal supervisors, and that, of course, is by developing principals who will one day ascend to the level of principal supervisor with a stronger instructional focus. And, of course, in order to do that, it begins not just at the principal level, but it begins with department heads and APs, assistant principals, And that's really changing the whole culture and the professional development of the district. And this is the beginning of that process that will take and evolve over a period of years.
Right, and I guess, I would still ask, given that, because I know that this is a 5-year effort, and I also know that we do have some challenges in our school leadership, is to at least consider, strongly consider, a parallel effort that clearly would not be funded by this particular program, so that we can begin to develop the leadership skills at the school level that can't wait for 5 years.
Well, and Dr. Boza does that continuously through our Leadership Academy. We are doing that, and we're always reevaluating the curriculum and the leadership models that are currently being offered to our principals as well as our assistant principals. So that's an ongoing effort. Now, we're rethinking it because we're beginning to focus more on instructional leadership, and that's a relatively new development. We need instructional leaders, and that is a new component, not so much new. We're putting greater emphasis on that going forward. It's not new. It's just that we are going to put greater emphasis on helping our principals and our associate principals be stronger leaders in terms of improving outcomes for in our classrooms for our students. Is that fair, Dr. Boza?
Well, final comment, if I could, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chairman, is to also ask that a couple of other factors at least be included in consideration of leadership development in the schools, and one being organizational management skills, as well as stakeholder engagement skills.
That's good. That's fair.
Mr. Orson?
Couple of questions, and some of them may actually end up going to Ms. Gupta, so I'm not trying to circumvent you, but I want to just understand, and I apologize for not sending these questions before. They are kind of technical legal questions, but I want to understand first the deliverables we're getting from the contractor, and then you'll see where there's so they're going to develop some materials for us from kind of whole cloth, if I'm reading this correctly?
That is correct.
Okay, so my question, and again, I apologize for not sending this last week. I just sort of just caught my eye. And again, this question may be more for Ms. Gupta. Under the copyright provision under here, I'm wondering, since we're paying all this money and we're commissioning this work, my first question is why the work's not work for hire as opposed to the copyright remaining with the contractor? And secondly, if there's some answer I'm missing, then why we at least don't have kind of a perpetual license back in those materials to us, because the way this thing's written. Now, it's a hyper-technical question, but the lawyer just popped out of me.
I think it's a fair question, but I think it would be better served through some deliberation with counsel in a more private setting.
Okay.
Because it is legal, and it may be sensitive in its nature. So if Mr. Orson doesn't mind, we'd like to get back and provide you with your answer.
Right. I just didn't, if we were going to, before we approved it, I just wanted to make sure the language of the contract accurately reflected protection of our interests and our rights. So.
Well, I'm not currently practicing law, so I won't venture.
Why don't we?
Yeah, at this
So
point,
whatever, and I'm happy to go offline. I looked at this, and all of a sudden it popped up that I thought it probably came from them, and I think there may be a hole in this thing in terms of protecting our rights.
And Mr. Thurman's right. I would hate to opine about the language of a
Right.
contract that I haven't had time to really review and dig into.
Could we defer on this maybe and get back to this agenda item later in this session, and maybe you'll have some time to take a look and I'm happy to go offline and sort of walk through it with her. It's not meant to, I support us doing this. I just want to make sure our rights are protected, and I'm reading this right now, and I'm a little concerned by this copyright provision.
Mr. Coleman has the solution.
I'll propose something. Since this is just about the consent agenda, why don't we just leave it on the consent agenda for now? If we haven't resolved the contract language to your satisfaction by the evening meeting, then we can always pull it off the consent agenda at the business meeting.
Okay, so that's fine.
Smart. No further no further discussion. Is there any opposition to placing this item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, this item will be placed on the consent agenda.